Hey guys, Besa Gordon here. Welcome to another episode of Back to Besa. It is that time of the month where we have our love and relationships coach, Debrena Jackson-Gandy, come in here. And in case you forgot, she is the author of this amazing book, The Love Lies. And today we are going to talk about 4 different love lies. And the topic is love STDs. Now, I'm not going to explain to you what that means. I'm going to bring in Debrena. We're going to get into the topic and she's going to let you know what she really means by that. Hey, Debrena.
Hello, hello.
How are you today?
I am wonderful. Good to be back.
Absolutely. It's great to have you back. It's nice outside. We're going to have an amazing conversation. I'm definitely hoping that you guys are able to take home something or use something at home in terms of communication once we go through these love lies for the day. But I think that we're just going to jump right into it. You know, last time we talked about how communication is messed up in relationships, how divorce is up after the pandemic. We talked a little bit about dating apps and how that's kind of changed the face of dating, especially when it comes to communication, because you're basically able to be whoever you want to be on these apps and you're just texting and typing. And then when you come in person, it's like, I don't really know what to say to you. Mm-hmm. See, now that we've done that, and if you guys haven't seen that, definitely go watch last month's episode. But today we're talking about love STDs. And we're definitely not talking about the ones you guys are probably thinking about. Debrena, what do you mean by love STDs?
Well, it's another Debrena-ism. You know, I love making up phrases and concepts. It means love socially transmitted delusions. And what I'm referring to is how so many of these false, faulty beliefs about love relationships and dating and marriage get passed on, and they become transmitted through generations. They get transmitted through media images and love songs, so-called love songs, movies, even toys, as some of my research shows. And so that was the kind of nickname that I use for these falsehoods and how they are passed on.
I'm curious to know like a little bit about toys. Like what is like Barbie and Ken doll toys?
Well, for example, in my Love Academy 101, which is my all women's love relationship course, because as you know, I also have them for men only. One of the questions I ask women to help them understand how we start to get our cues about how to relate to others, especially in the love relationship space, is I ask them, how many of you had a baby doll? Now, a baby doll is a toy, but it also turns out to be the replica of a very helpless human infant right around the equivalent of 5 months old. And there's a certain age range inside which we get the baby doll, and that's very consistent. It's usually between age 3 and 5 before you start elementary school. Now, what's interesting about that is that it's a high maintenance toy. It's not a toy you play with and discard it, leave it in the middle of the room, but you actually are required as a little girl, 36 months old, you're still in pull-ups, to treat that toy as if it were real. So burping, changing diapers, feeding, laying it in the bassinet, you don't just throw it on the ground. Or a well-meaning woman who's in your environment, mama, auntie, grandma, will say, don't be a bad mommy, you're 36 months old. Put your baby in the crib.
Or if that's not how you take care of your baby, you're just gonna throw your baby around?
Right.
And don't let it be one of the baby borns. Remember the baby borns?
Yes! Right.
I had a baby born and I cried until I got it.
Okay, so that's one of the significant toys we get as little girls, 36 months on the planet. But what's interesting is little toddler boys, they get a G.I. Joe, the Power Ranger, the Hulk or Mr. T, or they get an action figure. And it doesn't require maintenance. It's a full-sized, it's small, but it's a full-sized adult, and they can discard it, break an arm. There's no comment made, be a good daddy, pick up your doll. And think of how creepy that would be to say to a 36-month-old little boy, don't be a bad daddy, be a good daddy. But we say that to little girls, and it doesn't even strike us as kind of bizarre. So even toys, or we have the toys where as little girls, we're cooking and we're cleaning and we get the kitchen sets. Boys don't tend to get, manual labor toys around the house like that.
Yeah.
And so toys is even part of it. And it's not that I'm condemning toys, I'm just pointing out how and where do we get shaped in terms of how we show up in our love relationships and marriages. And it starts even that early, 36 months
The
old.
conditioning.
Right. And then after the baby doll, then the baby doll's discarded. And again, with women, it's a certain time frame. By age 5, the baby doll's discarded, and then another doll's on the scene, Barbie or the Barbie equivalent. So we go from the over caretaking and the doing is how we define how we love and express our love to another human, to now being overly obsessed with our image and with things. And I'm telling you, as adult women, we still are suffering from the infection from even some of the programming around toys. So that's always really surprising women, because they don't ever think to associate a toy or Disney animation classics. I can ask women in a Love Academy, different generations, different parts of the country, different kinds of upbringing, and I can tell a little bit about the Cinderella story. I said, is anyone familiar with this plot line? All hands go up. How could all of us, ages 72 down to someone who might only be 25 in a class, all be familiar with this animation story? Well, if it's pervasive, that also means that the themes of it we're also aware of the themes. So I'm out to find the one, Mr. Right, the prince, the savior. And when I find the one, and there's only one, another love lie, then he will provide the love I've been missing. I have a hole in me until the love comes from an outside source. And then we ride off into the sunset, happily ever after.
Hoping to never turn back into a pumpkin.
So those are just some of the more innocent ways that the programming starts. And that's just a few of the ways. So then you compound that year after year, decade after decade, not to mention what are we actually seeing and hearing in our physical 3D environment that we're in, and it creates messes. Men, messes, women, messes, and then here we are trying to have juicy love relationships and juicy marriages. We have the highest divorce rate in the world right here in the US.
Just one big mess.
One big mess. And the pandemic exposed that how we've been relating and engaging was not equipping us for intimacy. It wasn't equipping us for connection, even conversation, because when the world slowed down during the pandemic and came to almost a halt in terms of all that activity and that frenetic rushing and back and forth, and if I had more time, we had the time. And we fumbled, we mumbled, and we stumbled. And it exposed how shallow our connections were, or did we even really know the person well and like the person that we were married to? Yeah. And a lot of people, the conclusion was, I don't have the skills to connect. Who is this person? And a lot of divorces, like you were mentioning, 34% spike whoosh, in divorces. And we already had the highest divorce rate in the world. It exposed some things. It didn't cause divorces. It exposed some things that were already going on.
Okay, so I personally didn't plan on taking the conversation in that direction, but the moment that you said toys, I was like, okay, we have to talk about this, because I know if I was watching, I'd be like, Besa, I need you to dig just a wee bit into that. I need to know what she's talking about. And I'm pretty sure someone's mom or dad is looking at how their daughter is like caring for their baby doll, and they're like, what have I done? So, okay, let's jump back into these love lies real quick. Love lies that women have. Let's talk about like one of those real quick.
Yeah. Well, there's actually a set of female love lies and a set of male love lies, because actually we're conditioned very differently around love relationships, and they often are conflicting and very divergent, to add insult to injury. And one of the, what I call granddaddy or grandmother love lies of them all for women, is that love is found. But here's what the programming and conditioning says, is that love is found outside of ourselves. Love is found in the one, and there's only one, which is another love lie. We call him the soulmate or Mr. Right. We have little nicknames for him. And once I find him out there in the world, then I can be complete. Then I can be fulfilled. And love is really found where? It's built into our divine design. And there's levels of our love for ourselves. But what happens is, if you skip over this primary human relationship, and we got holes in the love, but you've been told that love is found out there, then no matter what that man does, you will never be satisfied. And one of the main frustrations in my mentality course, all men, so that they can feel comfortable being truthful and disclosing, is that so many men, and I'm talking about the college-educated, successful, handsome, fit, employed or have their own business kind of brothers and men, they talk about how inadequate they feel in their relationship spaces because they get caught up in the web of this love is found love lie, and we're looking for someone to complete us and to bring the love that we haven't connected to within ourselves. Well, that's like trying to pour water in a bucket that has holes in it. You will be pouring continuously. So
it'll never be enough.
It'll never be enough. And then the water level will continue to always drop and the water will spill everywhere. It'll be a continuous cycle. That's the experience that many of us have in our love relationship spaces. So that love is found is a big one. It's reinforced in all the chick flicks, the romantic comedies, which are definitely directed towards women. They play on that love lie. Valentine's Day has capitalized on that love lie. Soap operas, a lot of our streaming, shows. So it gets reinforced, even though we may be adult women, like, oh, please, I know that's not true. Well, our behavior reveals something different.
Well, that, and I think sometimes people forget, like, what's actually deep down is always sometimes what actually shows up outside. Even though you don't purposely want for it to, you don't think it's going to, it pops up when you least expect it because it's so rooted that it just is there. It's a part of you now.
Yeah.
I'm curious to know if you have some steps for women out there, just like some quick beginner steps to actually work on that love within. Because if you're looking for a relationship, like you said, if you have holes, it doesn't matter if you go on 6 dates, 2 amazing dates, 1 date that's been going on for 3 months, whatever have you. Like, you're almost wasting your time on dating apps if you don't have that love from within.
Yeah.
So do you have any advice?
Well, yeah. But one of the quick tips I would share is that, when you ask most women, what is it? How do you want to be romanced? We have some very clear ideas. Well, I'd like him to do this, and I'd like him to take me here, and I'd like him to do this, and I'm like, okay, that's wonderful. So you do know what kind of things appeal to your feminine spirit and what kind of experience you would want to have. I said, now the question becomes, since you're already in a love relationship with you, you're already in one. So are you romancing yourself? And that doesn't preclude someone else from also romancing you. But instead of you holding your breath and waiting until, well, begin to bring to yourself the very things that you know work for your mind, your body, your spirit, your soul. And so if I'm bringing, getting flowers for myself because I love the fragrance or I love the color, that doesn't mean that I can't be brought flowers by somebody else. But instead of me waiting until and deferring it until some person outside of me does it, well, you can start to bring that joy into your life right now. And so romance yourself. What things to you are considered romantic? Bring the elements in. And there are certain elements. Lighting, that's why when you talk to a woman, she often likes soft lighting or candlelight, right? If you're being romanced, you don't want some hardcore trap music. You usually want something softer, something slower, right? When you are asked if you could go to your favorite restaurant in terms of a romantic restaurant, then there's textures and there's colors and the food is presented beautifully, right? And aesthetically it's pleasing. So we know what it is that for us would be considered and feel like being romanced. So begin romancing yourself. And it actually makes you juicier and more magnetic so that you have strengthened your drawing and attracting power. So begin by romancing yourself.
I think what's also good about that is if you're already buying yourself flowers, you're already taking yourself out to dinner, take yourself to a movie, to a spa, to do those things that just make you feel good that you want for someone else to do to you or for you. I think it creates a situation of when it finally is done for you, you're not like jumping over tables because he bought you flowers. You know what I mean? It's like, I appreciate the flowers, but I also love myself enough to get myself flowers. So I'm not going to be like 50 extra points because you got me flowers, but I love the flowers.
That's right. And you'll be grateful for them and you won't have so much weight hanging on it if he doesn't do it. And then the other thing, we were talking about expectations earlier. part of this female programming is we tend to have a ton of expectations that never get communicated. And so he should already know that I like flowers. Well, how about you just communicate it versus having the expectation and don't actually articulate it? So, but yes, you also will be more grateful instead of feeling entitled. And that will be something already in your experience, and now more of it's coming. So there's appreciation. So it's a win all the way around.
Yeah.
I had a friend of mine one time say, a man asked me, what's my favorite flower? Because he wanted to bring her flowers that were her favorite flowers. She goes, oh my gosh, I don't even know. I have no clue. She goes, do you know what your favorite flower is? I said, girl, absolutely. I know my favorite fragrance flower. I know my favorite visual flower. She's like, what? I said, because I get flowers for myself because I love flowers. So I know what I really like and what appeals to me. He wants to get it right. He wants it to be on the bullseye for you. He's not going to bring what some other woman's favorite flower was.
Yeah.
I said, but if you don't know, that's about self-knowledge and self-intimacy. That's the other thing that romancing yourself cultivates, is you get clear about things, what things really work for you. So when he asks, because he wants to please you, then you're able to articulate it, and then he can execute and deliver, which works for his male spirit to get it right.
Yeah, and then also, you know, if you don't know your favorite flowers, it's kind of like, well, do you really want the flowers, or do you just want the idea of getting the flowers? Like, do you really like flowers?
Right? Are you just going through the motions because you think you're supposed? Yeah.
Like for me, I think flowers are pretty. I have allergies, so you know, it's not like I'm like, hey, I need flowers. I like them, but I usually turn them upside down instantly and dry them out because of my allergies. So that way, like the pollen's not getting everywhere. So it's like,
so you might want a beautiful dried flower arrangement or a beautiful silk flower arrangement.
Yeah.
That's why we got to ask and we got to know.
So I think that is amazing for women, to where it's like, that also kind of goes into knowing yourself. Yes. And then that goes back into that self-love for self before actually getting into a relationship. Because otherwise, I don't know, it almost seems like you're going to just like what he likes, or what he thinks that you should like, because he's like, oh, okay, well, I don't know what flower that you like, so I'm just going to get these roses because women typically like roses.
Right. Exactly, and that's actually one of the love lies. The female love lies is that self-love is optional. And there's so much focus on the other, on the him, on the one, on Mr. Right, that this love relationship that we've been in since we arrived often gets neglected and overlooked. And that is part of self-love, is self-intimacy, self-knowledge, self-knowing, self-recognition, self-honor. And there's levels of self-love. So it isn't just I have it or I don't. In one of my previous courses, Juicy Woman University, I actually distilled 7 levels out with specific characteristics so my students could look to see what level of self-love am I operating at right now. And, you know, the women that do my programs tend to be pretty high achieving, successful, educated women. And the average out of 7 levels was 3 or 3.5. Yes.
How?
Because when you look at the behaviors, our inner thoughts, how we treat our bodies, how we speak, even things like rest, you know, that isn't honoring the body. When you lay those things out, like at this level, here's the behaviors. And when women rated themselves, it's like, that's level 3, level of self-love characteristics. Yeah. So now let's look at level 4 and how we could elevate you to 4. And at 4, let's elevate you to 5. And at 5, let's elevate you to 6. And so, but they've never had it broken down into levels. It's just like, I love myself. Well, let's take a look at what level of love you're at. So, yeah, self-love is not optional. And we really actually need to be, in order to be in a juicy love relationship, because you can love yourself and still have some very unhealthy behaviors, very unhealthy beliefs, very unhealthy thought processes. So we really want to get up to levels 4 and 5, get that love up, that self-love up to 4 and 5, so that we can attract the qualities that we say we want. Below that, you're going to attract a whole funky mixture.
It's going to be kind of whatever.
And that's what we were getting.
I mean, you're just,
right.
I'm just going to take what the world hands me.
Right. And women get confounded, like, you know, should I settle? Well, why are you having a conversation about settling? What that means is someone is showing up that isn't consistent with who you think you should be drawing into your space. So now let's look at where your level of self-love is, because there might be some mixtures of high level and low level self-love, and what's showing up is a reflection of that. So let's not talk about settling, let's talk about elevating the level of self-love and being consistent across all the areas of that, because it also includes how we speak, it includes how we feel about our bodies, not how we seem to feel, but how we really feel. Like if you could crack our heads open and put our thoughts on loudspeaker about our bodies, would it be some kind of self-denigrating comments, or would it be self-affirming, or would it be a mixture? Would it be comparison? Would it be negative judgment? For a lot of us, it would be the latter. So when I talk about self-love, there's elements to it that make it be at the level it's at. So that's something we usually overlook. And in getting ready for juicy love relationships, how about, have you elevated your self-love? Wait, what, Debrena? How about that being part of the readiness? No one's ever asked me that. No one even, they just said, well, tell me about him, girl. Ooh, yeah, he sounds good. No one's ever asked me, do I know how to speak manese, right? Another one of the skills we talk about. No one asked me, are you ready? Have you elevated your level of self-love? We don't even ask the right questions when we have conversations about love relationships.
So it's almost like we need to have those juicy love relationships with ourselves too.
First.
Like that's where it starts before it can go anywhere else.
That's origin. Absolutely.
Okay, well, shoot. I know that you don't typically talk about this, but I'm going to see if I can get y'all some tea. We just talked about 2 women love lies. And in case you guys were wondering, in the book, Love is Found is actually chapter 3, and that is love lie number 1. And then He Should Already Know, which was the second one we talked about, is chapter 10, and that is love lie number 8. Now, I'm curious to know if we are able to talk about any male love lies.
Right here on Back to Besa. Dun, 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 dun. I will share some. Women ask me that all the time, Besa. Debrena, can you share some of the male love lies? And I say, no, we're going to focus on the female love lies. But here, because I like you, we can discuss a couple.
Y'all better hit TiVo.
Okay. Well, I'll do one for single men.
Okay.
A love lie single men tend to hold. And then one that married men tend to hold. So one for single men is that a good-looking woman is a good woman. And the way that men are programmed, it's to be able to recognize in 4 or less seconds flat if she is to him a good-looking woman. But then when I ask men, well, tell me, how do you know if she's a good woman? Now we have fumbling, mumbling, stumbling, grasping for straws. And I said, gents, it's okay. You haven't been conditioned to pay much attention to that. You've been conditioned for your eye, she's fine. I said, and I'm not saying a good-looking woman can also be a good woman, but when it comes to particularly long-term and then choosing a wife, you need to know what the qualities are and the way of being and the life outlook and the level of self-love that a woman is operating from to know whether she would be a good woman in a relationship context or is she just a good-looking woman. And men admit, like, dang, Debrena, I haven't really had any conversations about that. And so that's one of the love lies, is that a good-looking woman is a good woman. Not necessarily. And they don't go automatically hand in hand. And then for married men, one of the love lies is that dating is how you get her to become wife. That's the process. The truth is that dating should continue after you're married. It actually should elevate. It actually should become an art form. And what happens is, because of that love lie, okay, dated her, ring on finger, now she's wife. The phase, dating was treated as a phase instead of a constant, but now take it to a higher level, up your game. And husbands in mentality, my men only course will say, I have never thought about that before. Well, the reason you haven't thought about that is because you've been conditioned that dating is how you get to this point and then it ceases. And what helps to keep a marriage juicy is you continue to date your wife, making the plans, getting yourself cleaned up, shaving, all the things you did to upgrade your look, to prepare, think about, and think through the plans for the evening. Same thing. But we can get very lazy once we get married. We can treat the other as familiar once we get married. And all those are things that kill the wonder, that kill the passion, and that kill the excitement. So to consider dating as something that gets elevated to a whole nother level once you're married is the love truth. To treat dating as something I do to get her to being my wife and then I stop is the love lie. And it's so pervasive with married men.
So in other words, dating is not a temporary thing. It is not the, okay, we dated for about 6 months to a year, we got engaged, now we're married, and now I never have to take her out to dinner anymore. Like, we still need to do all the things that we were doing, if not more. I have a cousin, and she always talks about how, at least when she still lived here in Seattle, she would drop her kids off with her parents, and then her and her husband, they would go out, and sometimes they would leave town. And she was like, man, we do our best to make sure that we're constantly still going on our dates, we're constantly still having time for each other, and that's what helps prolong our marriage.
Exactly, because what can happen, especially once kids are in the scene, is they displace the husband and wife and they become the center of everything. And the union is first that husband and wife. And then the kids, whether they're from a blended family, but the kids were created by a husband and wife, whether it's blended or that family. So really, the husband and wife should always stay in the center. Their connection should always stay tight. Their spirit should always stay connected. And don't let anything come between you, even your children. So that's why feeding the relationship like it was a plant, fertilizing it, that continuing to date each other and having the perception of this is my wife and my date. And I want to create a wonderful experience for her because she is my beloved and the one out of all the people that I could have chosen on earth. She chose me and I chose her. And then you date from that place? Come on now. All right.
Magic.
And the kids, when they see that kind of connection, they're watered by the love. They have confidence that the connection is strong so they can relax. Versus, well, they're wondering if the parent's going to break up because they're arguing. It allows their nervous system to relax and for them to feel secure because they know that that bond and that love is tight and that they benefit from that being tight and secure. So, so even that, where the kids tend to take over everything, that's why this whole concept of empty nest. Once the kids are gone, well, that means too much of the attention, focus, and emotional energy was invested in the kids. If now that they're gone, now we have all these people divorcing. The attention got out of order. And understand the sequence. Everybody wins.
So yeah, it definitely kind of also goes into your youth and your childhood and like kind of what you're growing up around.
Yeah.
Like that dysfunction in the household kind of will seep into your actual relationships. And I think that sometimes people don't necessarily think about that when they're like dating until you have a conversation like this where it's like, now that I think about it, this is what, and it's no like disrespect or shade to your parents. It's just that their dysfunction has now kind of seeped into being your dysfunction and you don't necessarily realize why that's one of your dysfunctions.
Well, I think that's also one of the reasons that, so many millennials and Gen Z are like contempt for marriage because they had a front row seat. And they got to see what went on in the comments and the body language and the tension. And they're like, if that's marriage, I don't want it. We have the highest divorce rate in the world in this country. So the chances of kids watching something that was dysfunctional and toxic and conflict-ridden and frustration-riddled was high. And so we've been out of order for so long that now we have 2 generations that are like, miss us with marriage. Like, why? And the sacredness is gone. We don't understand the advantages, the benefits. We certainly aren't ready and prepared. And so a complete reboot is needed. Yes.
I'm here for the reboot. Now, let's switch gears just a smidge, not like a full street change, just, go over to another lane. Before we even need a full relationship reboot, what is a love lie for single men? And maybe they need a reboot too.
Well, the one about a good-looking woman is the same as a good woman is very prevalent with men. And in my mentality course, I will ask men, so tell me, what makes for a good woman? And you get a lot of pondering and looking up, and one of the men said, well, if she can cook good. And I said, that's a skill. I said, so tell me about the qualities. And then it was like, So men have not been in their programming around love relationships. They have not been installed with, how do I recognize, because you can't recognize until you're least aware. What are the qualities of a good woman? How does it show up? How would I know? Because you can't recognize it if you don't even know what the indicators are. So then we enter into, well, let me share with you some of those qualities and how they show up so you can recognize them. If you're interested in a long-term relationship, if you're interested in especially covenant marriage. And men will say over and over again, no one ever broke this down for me. No one ever told me. I didn't even know. You know, one of the things I will mention is that if you're interested in a longer term relationship, someone who you can have committed relationship, monogamous, the two of you, not just both you dating multiple people, and especially if you're thinking about permanence, which marriage is designed to be a covenant relationship, which makes it unique of all other kinds of relationships we can be in. But you want to know what kind of life outlook she has. Is it a pessimistic one? Is it a victim? Is it guilt and fear? Is it people are guilty until proven innocent? Is it cautious? Is it, you want to have an understanding of her outlook in the world, because it informs how she moves in the world. And it informs you of how she perceives herself in the world. And because the kids come through a woman's body, children come through the body of a woman, we are the first home of every human that has ever walked the earth. And that disposition alone, not to mention all the other ones that are also important, attitudes about money and on, but that disposition will tend to get transmitted. Not your disposition, her life disposition. And so, oh my God, I never thought.
Didn't even do that.
Right. So that's just one little taste of some of the things that I share with men. And then they're like, well, how will I know? I said, well, let's look at the questions you're asking. Do any of them give you insight into her life disposition? No, because I'm asking, where does she work and what does she like to do in her free time? If you ask her and listen to her word choice, her words are like a paintbrush on a canvas. They will paint it for you. But if you don't ask the questions because you didn't know and you're kind of a little preoccupied with the dimensions, the physical dimensions, they're kind of taking up the whole space, and you're not thinking about, hold up, I need to understand some things about her life outlook, her self-concept, her level of self-love. Those things they haven't even been taught to think about. So because a woman who's operating from high-level self-love is the easiest one to love. The one operating from low-level self-love is high emotional maintenance. So that's really important, gents, for you to have some idea of where is her level of self-love. Because wherever there's holes, wherever there's wounds, wherever there's unhealedness, she's going to look to you to be what I call her human spackle. Fill my holes.
Not spackle.
Human spackle. And then again, here we are, always doing like pouring water into a bucket with holes, always pouring, men always pouring, like, dang.
Because we're not going to act like spackle doesn't wash off over time. Like, I thought that hole was filled. We fixed this already.
And there's a crack. How did the crack get there? Yep.
If anything, the hole might have gotten bigger. Okay, well, shoot. Before we get ready to get out of here today, Ms. Debrena, is there anything else that you want for people to know about the love STDs?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's time for us to get detoxed of them, that's for sure, because they do get passed on, and we can be the generation and the generations where the buck stops. And instead of operating from the love lies, we can start to operate from truths and let that be what gets passed on and transmitted. And that's why I wrote the book. That's why I do Love Academy Mentality, you know, soon to come more live co-ed events, because a renaissance is needed. And if you were socialized in these United States, you are not exempt. You've been infected. So don't think, oh, that's other men, that's other women, not me, it's them. If you grew up in these United States, especially between age 3 and 17, 18, you've been infected.
We've all watched Cinderella at least once.
So let's be the generations where the delusions stop.
Yeah. And they can start by y'all grabbing this book, okay? Please look into that camera and let everyone know where they can grab the Love Lies.
Absolutely. You can get a copy of the Love Lies, an autographed copy, through my website, milliondollarmentor.net. And there's also some other tools and resources on there if you are interested in getting detoxed, beginning the detox process. Lots of audio programs, live courses, ebooks, etc. So, milliondollarmentor.net.
Awesome, you guys. Head on over there, check that out, and definitely get rid of some of those love lies that we have all, I don't know, maybe unintentionally ingested or have just let kind of like fester and grow. Until next time, dude, I have to ask you really quick, do you know what we're talking about next month?
Off the top of my head, I don't. Do you?
No, not off the top of my head. So you guys, it's gonna be a surprise. I'm gonna see if we can get some more of those male love lies. I don't think I'm going to be able to, but I'm going to try, okay? I got 2 good ones out this month. But either way, you guys, look, I want to say thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you guys took a lot of notes. I know I definitely mentally took some notes. I just want to thank you for joining me today, Miss Debrena. And of course, you guys, until next time, I want for you to have an amazing rest of your day. And of course, keep that energy high.